You're watching.
You're watching.
You're watching.
You're watching
West Hartford.
West Hartford Community Television.
Community television.
Community television.
For the community.
For the community.
For the community. For the community.
For the community.
By the community.
By the community.
By the community.
By the community.
For the community. By the community.
And it's a wrap.
Hi, you're back again. Thanks for tuning in again to another Journeys with Jeff. I appreciate your paying us a visit every week. Today we have a very interesting guest, and we're going to get right started right and meet him right away and talk to him about his journey. Iran Nazario.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us, and tell us a little bit about what do you do?
Well, currently I am the director of a youth program in Hartford by the name of Peace Builders. And the program I started about 13 years ago, which was dedicated to ensuring that young men and women in Hartford who were deemed disconnected had some type of positive person in their lives to guide them in the right direction. I'm also the founding and founder and president of the Peace Center of Connecticut, which should be opening its doors in Hartford in September of this year. And it will serve the community as a central hub of activity and collaboration for peace efforts across the state of Connecticut.
How did you get involved? What is it that motivated you or caused you to get involved in this kind of working with kids at risk in Hartford?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Wow, great question, because I think it has a lot to do with the past that I lived in Hartford, being a young person who was disconnected. I can kind of give you an abbreviated version of my story. So my mom came to Connecticut due to spousal and domestic abuse with my dad. So he fractured her jaw and her eye socket and her ribs while she was pregnant. So she came here and had an emergency birth with me, and I was came to be born here. After that, my mom became addicted to heroin and crack and started kind of being out on the streets in Hartford. And I ended up being removed from the home at about the age of 5 and went to a foster care in New Jersey. Spent about 3 years there and then went to my dad, who also began to physically and mentally abuse myself and my brother, my oldest brother. So we were removed from there, from custody there 3 years later, sent to foster care and eventually back to Hartford, where at the age of 11, my mom went to prison for attempted murder on someone that she had a drug deal with. And at 13, I was homeless here in the city of Hartford for about 2.5 years before I landed in jail at 15, eventually 16 at prison, 17 in prison, and so on and so forth. Kind of kept going through the life that I had at that time till the age of 20 when I landed once again in prison. Joined a major gang in the city and started running the streets with the gangs. So,
Well, Iran, what is a 13-year-old boy homeless without a home?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming that DCF didn't keep track of you.
No.
What did you do? What was your daily life like? Did you go to school every day? Where did you live? How did you eat?
Well, first thing is that when the officers came to arrest my mom, I already had experiences with the Child Protective Services and foster care. So I ran away through the back of the building and just figured it out. I had a friend of mine named Cello who would sneak me into his dad's car. On warm days, we would sleep in the park. And really, I just started learning from the guys that were homeless on the street, the older guys, on how to survive out there. So we would scrap up whatever meals we could get from the church, or whatever we could scrap up, doing whatever. I was blessed enough to learn how to break dance a little bit. So when the G-Fox building was in downtown Hartford, I used to break dance in front of G-Fox and get pennies or quarters or whatever the case might be. And that's how I sustained myself. So for a number of years, I just car hopped or bridge hopped, depending on how cold or hot it was outside.
Did you go to any schools meanwhile?
No,
You never went?
Well, what I did is when I left Quirk Middle, it was right around the time my mom got into the problems that she did. So I would go to Hartford High to have the lunch. I would sneak in through the side of the school at Hartford High, eat lunch, and then leave. I would go to either 2 lunch waves and eat food, and that was my kind of connection to the school. I did go for maybe a 3-month period, but I was a violent kid. I was a hurt kid, so I would get into a lot of fights and get kicked out of the school. So it wasn't. I mean, although I went to the school, I really didn't go to the school.
Right. How did you wind up? At some point, you got into a gang.
Sure.
What was the gang?
Well, Solidos.
Los Solidos?
Los Solidos in Hartford.
How did that happen? Did you meet some of the members, or?
Well, I knew a lot of the guys from growing up in Hartford. So when the gang started to form in the city, I actually joined it in prison. And the way you join in prison is you do something for the gang. You either fight somebody they have a problem with, or you stash something that they need you to stash for them, or whatever the case might be. In my situation, they deemed that the appropriate kind of jumping in was to beat somebody up that they had a problem with. So I did that. And then I got bounced in, which is a form of another punishment where you have 2 people with comparable size to you. They beat you about the body and the neck and stuff like that for about 30 seconds to a minute, depending on what you violate as you're getting beat up or whatever. And if you survive that, then you become a member. And that's how I joined in the prison. I think what the draw for me was the fact that I never really knew what a family makeup was, and the gang for me kind of made it seem as it was a family to me. Just the connection, the cohesion, the bond that I felt that they had with one another was something that I had been desperately looking for, whether it was when I was homeless or whether it was when I landed in prison. So being approached in a warm way, in a way like, hey, listen, we'll take care of you, we'll do this and that, was something really not familiar to me. So I really, I think, felt myself kind of going in that direction, and it was easy to join after that.
How old were you when this happened?
I joined Solidos when I was about 20 years old.
And it gave you the sense of at least something that you had yearned for all of your life, is a sense of belonging, a sense of a surrogate family.
Sure. Yes.
That you had connections and people who cared about you.
Yeah, well, I think knowing now, I mean, I know a lot about gangs now. I do a lot of work to prevent young men from joining, young women from joining now. But back then, you just get a sense of not only belonging, but safety, right? You get a sense of power, depending on what positions they put you in. I mean, you can be anywhere from a soldier all the way to the president, and everyone has their role. So for me, it really was about belonging to something, but also having that backing and that support that you felt you needed as a young person.
What did you go to, you said you were in prison.
Sure.
Was it, what were some of the charges? What were the?
Assault. Most of my cases were assault. I used to fight a lot, and I used to get into that kind of trouble a lot. So it was either with weapons or hands, something like that.
Do you think that aggressive attitude, that fighting that you got into, you think that was a result of just being angry at all these things that happened to you since you were born, really?
Right, sure.
Caused you to become a very angry person?
Well, at some point I normalized the violence to me. It became my high, my rush, my dependency. If I wasn't hurting someone or involved in some type of conflict, I didn't feel complete. And I think it's attributed to the fact that my mother abused us physically so many years ago. And then my dad followed suit. And now I'm on the streets, and on the streets you survive many a times with violence. You survive by defending yourself. It's the same thing in prison. You know, if you're 15 years old and you're locked up with guys who are a couple of years older than you, they're going to try to do things to you, or try to steal your things, and the only real method of support, right, or backup you have is your hands or your willingness to hurt somebody. So when you experience that all of your life, growing up seeing that often, you start to normalize it and think that that's the appropriate action you take when when you're irritated or you're angry. And I was hurt by what my mom did. I was hurt by what my dad did. And then I was hurt because I just didn't feel like I belonged and connected to the community. So all of that hurt, right, and all of that teaching allowed it to be easy for me to hurt people.
So you think then, you certainly have probably have come to the realization to the awareness, given your own circumstances, that a person's experiences, previous experiences, can be very a major factor in how they behave in the future.
Absolutely.
It makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're wired very differently. However, anytime we experience a trauma, or anytime you experience something that dramatically changes who you are, you're bound to either go in a really bad direction, or you're bound to punish others, or you punish yourself. In this situation, I did both. By doing the things that I was doing to others, I was punishing myself. But yeah, I kept learning, and I wasn't born. I wasn't born to hurt people. But a lot of the things that happened to my mom when she was pregnant with me due to the abuse of my dad, I'm sure had a lot to do with it. And then the life after that, the displacement and the homelessness and the anger and the drugs and all these things, those are all things that make it easy for someone to go in that direction. I mean, you literally become the person that is being educated by that system to be that way, and you learn it. It becomes part of you.
And what is it that happened after you were in prison and you got out? What miracle happened that caused you to do a 180? What happened to you that you turned everything around?
Well, there were. I can always point to a couple of things, but one of the more significant things that happened to me is I was on Park Street in Hartford. I'm wearing my gang colors. I'm with about 6 or 7 of the brothers in the gang, and we're just doing what we do on a daily basis, just spending time out there, wasting the day. And this short man, about 4'9", pulls up in a convertible Mercedes-Benz, and on Park Street in Hartford. So we taught 3 things. 1, he's lost, and we should rob him because he's lost, right? So we're hungry, we're starving, we're like, let's rob this guy. 2, he's an FBI agent, let's run because he's gonna arrest us and we have weapons and all that stuff on us. Or 3, something happened where he's crazy. He just lost his mind, he ended up in the wrong neighborhood. So he gets out of his car, and I'll never forget the 3 words he said to me. He says, "Hey guys," and we're all kind of looking at him, don't know how to respond to him, and he says, "I'm doing a study on disproportionate minority hiring in Hartford." And I never heard those words in my life, so to me it was kind of like an insult. I don't know what the heck it meant, right? So we turn around and we say, "Is this guy serious?" So because we didn't really trust the situation, the gang president who was there, he pushed me and told me, "You talk to him. You deal with him, see what he wants." So he pulls out a University of Connecticut School of Social Work card and he says, "Give me a call." So I took the card, I threw it on the ground. I told him to get out of here before he got his butt kicked, etc. At that time. And as he was walking away, he said, "I'll pay you $15 an hour." And for a broke kid from Hartford, that sounded like $1 million to me. So I did still scare him off, but as the guys were turning around laughing and walk away, I scooped up his card and put it in my pocket. So I went home, and at that time I had a daughter with my girlfriend, and she was assaulted by a Latin king who was trying to hurt me. So she left me and went out to live with her mom, and I stayed in the apartment that I couldn't afford. So I ended up getting kicked out, and I went to stay with someone homeless again. I went into the pocket of those jeans and found this card, so I gave him a call, and that just kind of started the ball rolling on my life. I mean, I have a number of other stories in between that can help kind of paint a better picture, but if I could just kind of sum it up, it's he said some things and believed in me in a way that I felt was something I had never had from a man before, from an adult man who cared about me, and I started to see other opportunities and my own abilities through that person.
So you had an experience that was powerful enough to start to turn the tide, or to shift that balance of all the negative stuff, and it began to make it go in the other direction.
Well, this is how I see it. Prior to meeting Mike, I was in a bubble, and my bubble consisted of a couple of blocks of a city. That was it. I had never been out of the city unless it was to be in foster care or going to jail. So they'll send you to Niantic, or they'll send you to wherever. So those are my trips. My trips were fighting on the streets and going to prison. That I didn't really know about anything else. So what Mike allowed me to do was really start looking beyond that bubble and expanding what was in it. And by coming to the School of Social Work in West Hartford and working for him initially on that research project he was doing, allowed me to see other people and allowed me to connect with other people that I would have never connected with before, and started to really see that I could be elsewhere, that I could do other things, and that there were other people struggling but making it, and I just had to figure out what it was that they were doing to do so.
As you began to kind of part ways with Los Solitos and the gang life, and people who were your peers and your friends and your quote-unquote family, as you said.
Sure.
Was there any resentment? Did they feel betrayed? Did you get any pushback from them in terms of you betraying us, you're leaving us?
Well, the way it happened is I started working for Mike, and I was still in the gang when I was working at UConn. So, you couldn't just leave the gang at the time. You had to take either a termination or a severe beatdown. And at the time, I wasn't looking to do that. I was looking really to figure out how I can get as many of the brothers and sisters a job at UConn so they could see what I was seeing. So I figured I could change the game from within. 4 years into my last contract with UConn, I was indicted by the federal government for racketeering and other charges through the RICO Act that the federal government used on the Solidos to incarcerate all of the gang members. So I was swept up in that, and I went to federal prison in New Jersey for 2 years. And while I was there, I created a letter writing program for teens to help them understand the real experiences we go through in prison. So it would help them not to think about their actions. While I was doing that, UConn picked up on the story, said, okay, we'll rehire you when you come home. We feel that you're ready to kind of continue this project. And, therefore kind of started changing my perception. But the gang at the time started looking at me as if I was starting to desert them a little bit. Because now I was no longer really about committing missions for them or fighting for them or going to war with them. It was really about talking to them as much as I possibly could about all the good things. And they were kind of getting sick of it. I got beat up a couple of times for talking positive and wanting to change some of the laws in the gang and all that stuff. But so, I just persisted on, and eventually that talk went away. I mean, when you join a gang, you have to consider this. And I know this now because I was in it for a long time. You really never recover your reputation or the disconnections that you make because you hurt people. So just because I'm good and I'm in a place where I'm doing something different doesn't mean that one of my victims that I may not have had a chance to talk to has forgiven me. So it's kind of like for the rest of your life, you're going to have some resentment, whether it's within the gang or outside of the gang. So I'm sure there are brothers out there that still feel like, hey, you should have received the punishment that you deserve for leaving, but I got a pass, and they're called walking papers in the gang, and the warlord or the founder of the gang can sign off on it's like a contract, and they say this person has served the family, et cetera, et cetera. They can be let go without harm, and that's what happened with me.
Why did they do that? Why did they let you go without harm?
Well, they felt that what I was doing for the organization, by the time this all happened, I was able to find employment for 11 other gang brothers and sisters, and on top of that, I was able to work a truce between the 4 major gangs in the city to sign a contract not to go to war, etc. So they felt that at that time I had done enough for the family, and I was considered what they call an OG. Right, so an original gangster, an old gangster, even though I'm only 47, I was an old gangster to them. But so I got the OG stamp, and they let me go without injury or harm. So now I think I'm an asset to a lot of the guys that were in or still in through their kids. I help their kids. I've serviced and helped kids of all kinds, guys that were in different gangs. Rival gang members have brought their kids to me who say, I don't want my son or my daughter going down the same path that I'm going through. I know you're doing this work, so can you help my kids? I think that has more value than the hate that they may have felt for me at one time.
Are you still in touch with some of those?
Oh yeah.
Some of your old gang members?
Yeah, I think it's important for for me as a person to stay connected to some of these individuals, because when they're ready to turn their lives around, if they get there, you want to be able to help, because the only real way to reduce, in my opinion, to reduce the levels of violence that I saw and that I still see sometimes is really by helping people when they're ready to see other opportunities. So if I'm helping their kids, I have to stay in touch with them.
That's a very important point, when they're ready.
Right.
What's your theory of, in terms of, you look in your mind's eye over the years and all of these great number of ex-gang members, some of them probably never made it and they died.
Yep.
Some of them are probably still in prison.
Sure.
Others maybe have, I mean, you can't, when you're 50, 60, 70 years old, you're still not going to be a gang member. But what do you think happened with the ones that didn't die, that didn't go to prison? What happened in their lives? Did they have their own personal miracle happen?
Well, I can only speak for the ones I know. But what I can tell you is that you actually have to. I know 60-year-olds that are still gangbanging and still part of it. It becomes a family thing. It becomes something that they never break away from. Lifelong gang members. I know that some of the original guys from the Ghetto Brothers and Latin Locos and those Magnificent 20 guys, they're still. I can still see them wearing their jackets. They might be Savage Nomads now or some other name, but they're still out there and they're still representing the people that I know that have made it through. They'll have regular jobs, truck drivers, service workers, cab drivers. They're doing whatever they can to sustain their lives and stay away from that nonsense.
What's the difference? What's the difference in guys like who are able to break away and be free of that, and those that don't? Is there what do you think is it a matter of some inner strength, or is it a matter of these guys had somebody like you had that guy in that car,
right?
That something or some event, somebody or something came along in their life that helped them turn it around?
Well, I think everyone has a different kind of person they can lean on, or scenario that happens that transitions you, right? All of us, yourself included. You may have had some downtimes where you found something that motivated you to do something differently, and I think that's the same for these young men and young women. They go through all of these things, and then at some point something sparks. Either it's their children that say, "Dad, I can't do this with you anymore." It's the constant struggle of being arrested. It's the pressure. It could be, the religion. It could be a number of things. I know one of my former brothers who's a pastor now has his own church. I mean, he found his peace in religion. Others find it in music. Others find it in just being able to work and not look over their shoulders, the peace that brings to you. Others are hurt so badly or injured so badly, they have no choice but to go in a different direction. And the ones that stay, unfortunately, for the ones I know, it's still around them. It's still consuming them. Like everyone they're associated with is still part of some type of a connection to it in a bad way, or they're addicted to some type of drug or something that causes them to have that problem.
So that's where you come in, though. You say, these people spark. You kind of serve as that agent.
Yes.
To be that spark, or to create that spark in that person, in the work that you do.
Yes. Well,
rescue. You're like a lifeguard, a rescuer.
Well, we like to use the term interrupter, and the reason why we use it is we want to be able to interrupt their paths and where they're going. Right. So if they're heading in a wrong direction, we want to interrupt that by placing them in positions to be successful. You want to be able to give these young men and women out there another thought to have for the day. And that's what I learned through my experience with Mike. Prior to dealing with Mike, I could tell you what I talked about every single day. The brothers, the gang, the fights, the street, the girls, and the drugs, the partying. After I went to UConn for the first time, I could speak of, I saw a campus and there's students there and they do this, and the dialogue started to change. So for me, it's really about interrupting where they're at and then exposing them to things that'll give them options and different things to talk about so they can start believing that there's something different beyond what they're experiencing and going through at the time.
Well, getting it back to, on a personal note, you mentioned about forgiving, and I think you probably agree that forgiving is more for the for the sake or for the benefit of the person who does the forgiving.
Sure.
Because it's like the forgiving is a certain burden, something off their shoulder. How about Iran and your mother and your father? Do you feel that you've done that inner work?
Yes.
And that you've been able to come to a point where you've forgiven them?
Yes. Well, it was a really long process, and I believe that many of the things and actions that I participated in had a lot to do with my lack of forgiveness for my parents. My mom passed away 8 years ago, May 3rd, from cancer, and but it was really what really led to it was all the drug use. She never really recovered from the beatings of my dad and the heroin addictions and stuff like that. So she succumbed to that. But prior to her passing away, she asked me, "Do you forgive me?" Because and I understand now that she was sick. I understand that she went through a lot of trauma. She had a lot of injury, a lot of pain, and she didn't know how to parent. And so she took it out on us, unfortunately, and we ended up where we were. So I forgave her, and then my dad, I had a conversation with my dad a number of years ago, because I don't feel like I could serve the community, serve myself without forgiving them. I just felt if I had any animosity or anger towards them, I would hurt people, continue to hurt people.
Where's your father now?
My father's in Puerto Rico. He's retired.
Do you have any contact with him?
Yeah, I talk to him from time to time. Again, once you forgive, you move on. So I call him for his birthday. I call him for holidays, and stuff like that to make sure that he's still there. I mean, I'm not here without both of them, right? So I honor that. I'm a person who believes in honoring your parents. And even though they punished me as much as they did, I just felt that for me to be effective and be in a place where I'm at, I had to forgive them. So I talked to them.
Very, very interesting. Just to end this, we have to wrap it up.
Sure.
What's your going forward? What's your plan? What's your objective to accomplish in life?
Well, recently I founded the Peace Center of Connecticut, and my purpose for founding that is really to look at collaborative solutions to violence throughout the state of Connecticut. So my next journey would be to really bring together a number of groups across the state that are keying in on ways to prevent community violence and violence as a whole, to hopefully impact as many lives as possible outside of the city and in the city of Hartford.
Oh.
That's what I'm hoping to do.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. I don't think that this needs any summing up or any additional comments. This gentleman's life and words certainly speak volumes in and of themselves. I want to thank you very much for being with us for another journey with Jeff. Iran, thank you again.
No, thank
Iran
you for having me.
Nazario, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.